Hello, everyone. Welcome to this virtual event put on by The Logic on generative AI and cybersecurity. My name's David Reevely. I'm an Ottawa reporter for The Logic, and security and cybersecurity are among the areas that I cover. If you're new to The Logic, as some of you are, because this is an open event, you should know we are an independent digital news publication that covers all aspects of the innovation economy in Canada. We're approaching our 6th anniversary of doing this. We cover everything from electric vehicles to crypto to healthcare to security to innovation in agriculture and mining and fishing, basically everything that's going on to build the future economy in Canada. Subscribers are our lifeblood. They're what make it possible for us to do what we do. And if you want to join their ranks, we will tell you how. You can just go to our website, thelogic.co. And if you become a subscriber, then in addition to events like these, some of which are for subscribers only, you get access to the Logic Council Slack channel, insider events, our daily newsletter briefing, and feature stories every day of the work week on issues of important national consequence and fine details of what's going on in the communities that we cover. Today's event is sponsored by Kyndryl Canada. And to kick us off, we're going to have some remarks from Farhaz Thobani, who is the president of Kyndryl Canada. It's the largest IT infrastructure services provider in the country and, in fact, in the world. For more than 2 decades, Farhaz has worked alongside teams that leverage deep knowledge and experience to support mission-critical systems and the transformation goals of customers across North America. So he's going to give us some context for the conversation that we're about to have. Farhaz?
Thank you, David. Appreciate the time and appreciate the invitation here. Look, at Kyndryl, we design, build, manage, modernize, and secure the critical infrastructure that the world depends on every day. And folks, before we start, let me just tell you, business is booming, and it's not just a Kyndryl statement. This is a statement for all systems integrators and IT service providers. There is a ton of money being spent on IT transformation, and that's, of course, great for business. However, this transformation comes with a very worrisome trend. And let me explain. Given the limited capital available to generate outcomes, enterprises are faced with a choice. And it's twofold. They can spend this capital on transforming their internal infrastructure and modernizing the way they do business internally. So really a focus on their internal operations and their internal efficiency. Or they can spend their money on front-facing applications and front-facing infrastructure and really change the way that they interact with their clients. And this is really in an effort to maintain, retain, and attract new clients. And in many cases, given this choice, businesses have chosen the latter, which is to spend the money on the client side and focus on retaining, maintaining, and attracting new clients. And really with a better client experience. Now, the offset to all of this, or the sacrifice, if you will, has been the systems of record, if you will, that tabulate all of this information that these front-facing applications use every day. It's critical infrastructure. It's where the data resides. And it's really the backbone of support for these front-facing applications. And if you look at the trend right through the pandemic, it's in fact accelerated. So again, we're focusing on front-facing applications, which is really, really good. But the sacrifice is the legacy environments that sit in the data center that go ahead and do all of this compute and store all of this data that is critical for businesses to maintain and continue their operations. So we have this underinvestment, if you will. That's the result. It's legacy infrastructure. It's coming out of support. And it's attaching to state-of-the-art applications that are in dire need for speed and data demands, if you will. So it's like constructing a high-rise on top of a crumbling infrastructure. And this underinvestment, if you will, has led to vulnerabilities and security gaps. And those security gaps are scattered right through IT architecture. Last year in 2023, it was in fact the worst year for cyber attacks, and they're not cheap. $7 million a pop for each incident. And don't forget, of course, the brand damage, the trust issues that result. Recovery becomes a nightmare and extremely hard. Okay, now let's build on that thread. Enter generative AI. Let's automate our process. Let's further enhance our client experience. Let's learn from the last ones. Let's double down on our successes, and let's understand where we failed. Well, what if bad actors do exactly the same thing? What if they double down on their successes and understand where their failures came from? What does that mean for that aging infrastructure that we spoke about before? Well, what it does is it really creates something called a case for change and for modernization. Looking forward to 2024, I'll just get into what Kyndryl's take is on what we see happening in the coming year. So from an investment standpoint, the first level of investment we still continue to believe, and that's really the case for change, is that we'll see clients look to modernize their legacy infrastructure, simplify their IT architecture, and drive security investments right through 2024 and beyond. I think end of life gear will be examined, end of support assets will be examined, and the priority will be given to security and safety, if you will. The second point of investment is really going to be in resiliency. Investment here is really required to protect ongoing business operations in the event of an attack or an outage. So there's a recognition, I think, right across the industry from an IT standpoint, IT industry specifically, that it's not if an attack will happen, it's when the attack will happen. And the investment here in resiliency is about maintaining ongoing operations, ongoing business operations, maintaining those systems of record, maintaining those supply chains while an attack is actually in progress. And so that is the resiliency investment that's ongoing and continues to be required. The third point is generative AI will continue to present the world with security challenges. I think security leaders, and we'll hear more about this with the panel, will prioritize identity and access management and really revamp their containment models in an effort to protect against these AI type of attacks, these generative type of attacks. And that brings me to my last point, which is data. Data continues to be at the forefront. Now, data, again, resides on some of these legacy architecture and legacy infrastructure that needs to be modernized. But with the rise of Gen AI and security concerns, it's about protecting data, it's about simplifying data, it's about understanding the governance model around data, because quality data that is secure data is actually a currency and a differentiator for business. I'll end by just saying what happens next right through the industry will be very difficult and will require a ton of investment to modernize infrastructure and architecture and lay the groundwork for data and AI in a manner that can be consumed by business in a very safe and secure manner. But for those that do this right, I believe the prize will be very, very worthy. So with that, I'll pass it back to David and our panel of experts. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for your sponsorship today. The panel, which I'll introduce in a moment, is going to talk about generative AI and cybersecurity, and also some of the other technologies in that constellation of artificial intelligence and how it's affecting both what bad actors are doing and what good actors like you can do to protect yourself from them. ChatGPT burst onto the scene publicly a year and a little bit ago, and there was talk instantly about how it was going to revolutionize just about everything. And that includes cyber attacks and cyber defenses. And as it happens, just this morning, I was reading a threat briefing that came out of Microsoft talking about nation state actors and their use of large language models to foment cyber attacks. And the thing doesn't quite say that Microsoft has learned this because they are sponsors of OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, but that's the strong implication. And there's a list of a Russian military intelligence unit using large language models, a North Korean threat actor using large language models to impersonate reputable academic institutions to lure victims into telling them things they shouldn't tell them. An Iranian threat actor connected to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, 2 groups from China using large language models, both for research and to help guide their attacks. So one of the ways I think that large language models are obviously useful is in generating better phishing emails and deepfakes. There's a story you probably saw a week or 2 ago about a finance guy in Hong Kong who transferred the equivalent of $25 million, I think US, to the wrong people, thanks to very well generated phishing emails and a great deepfake video conference where he thought that he was dealing with people who he was not in fact dealing with. And so we're going to talk about that because it's inescapable, but the conversation is going to focus on the technical uses of generative AI, the ways in which threat actors can refine their attacks, and the ways in which you can protect yourself from them. Before I bring in the panel, I want to say, please ask your questions, ask them early, ask them often. We'll weave them into the conversation as best we can. These events are the best when the content comes from you and we're answering the questions that you want us to answer. So with that, I will introduce our panel, a frankly intimidating group. They consist of Melanie Anderson, who's the Director General of Secure Solutions and Services at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, part of the Communication Security Establishment, Canada's defense cyber spying, cyber espionage, cyber defense agency. Penny Longman, who's the Director of Information Security at the Fraser Health Authority, so in charge of protecting precious data and systems for the major health system in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. And Professor Arash Habibi Lashkari, whose biography is very long, but you need to know that he's the Canada Research Chair in Cybersecurity at York University and a professor in the Information Technology program there. Welcome to the panel. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to begin with a question for you, Arash Lashkari. At the cutting edge, what are some of the things that AI and the adjacent technologies are making possible for cyber attackers?
Yeah, thanks, actually, David. That's a very good question. If I want to answer this one, I prefer to go through the attacker's life cycle and see step by step what's happening now by these AI-driven actually solutions that we have. So from the first step, they are looking for vulnerabilities to exploit. So these AI-driven vulnerability discovery techniques can actually identify the vulnerabilities faster, which we call it zero-day vulnerabilities. And this is going to allow the attackers to exploit those vulnerabilities before we prepare any patches or any solution. In the next step, they need to actually create the malware, which we call it weaponization. So for the creation part, this AI algorithm can actually generate the custom malware variants that actually tailor to the specific targets. For example, I remember one of them that we call it emotet. It's a botnet. So they are using ML actually algorithm for changing their appearance in each infection times. Or for example, the obfuscation techniques that they are using. So malware developers can use this AI algorithm to actually automatically generate the complex and sophisticated code obfuscation methods, which is going to make it difficult for the security solutions to detect them. For example, polymorphic malware can use this AI algorithm to actually change their code entirely, the structure of the code in actually any time to avoid the detection. And the last time is the detection solution that we have. So they can use this one to actually avoid from this one. So in somehow I can say it's a threat detection evasion system that is going to help the malware developers to actually improve their code to stay away from the traditional security measures that we have. For example, I remember one of the first family of the ransomwares who used the ML algorithm was the Gantt Crab, that they used ML algorithm to use the different encryption methods and also generate the encryption actually keys, which is going to help them to stay away. Or another one was the Ryuk. It is actually developed by the Wizard Spider, who They are famous because of their bot. They name it TrickBot. So they actually use ML to identify the high value target in one organization instead of spread it to the whole, and then just attack to that specific actually target by actually customizing the encryption also. So in this
So
case, I
machine
can say in all these steps, this AI actually driven solution is going to help them to be more professional, actually faster, improve the solution, and also stay away from our detection.
So all the ways in which AI can help with a traditional business process, it can also, make cyber attackers more professional, help them come up with variants so that they can just stay a little bit ahead of detection and actually write code that changes form as it makes its way through a series of systems. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Excellent. Great. That's nice to hear. Melanie Anderson at the Center for Cybersecurity. How does that relate to what your group sees from 30,000 feet trying to survey the whole country?
Yeah, there's a lot happening in this space, and it's hard to stay on top of all of these things. Certainly, there are a lot of things I think about from a cyber defense perspective. There's obviously opportunities to leverage the good guys and gals that are defending, from some of these specific threats. But we also look at the threat surface at large. So when I think about some of the specific aspects to the threat landscape, we've talked a little bit already about supply chain threats. So you really have to look at the entire ecosystem and how to protect the individual aspects of that ecosystem. And we have some publications on our website around supply chain threats and some of the risks. You have to look at everything from the hardware to the software to the people actually operating the systems and the data, and how that's actually being done in practice. But I also think as a former software developer and somebody who's worked at CSE for many, many years in various aspects of our business, time is money. So you have to figure out how to get ahead of the attacker in order to learn from what they are doing so that we can get ahead of it to protect and defend against it. And I think of a specific example. When I was a coder back in the day, actually, when I went to UNB, I had to do a lot of things manually, and I fast forward 20 years later, I look at the actual skills and tools that are available to not only the folks that are developing solutions to protect and defend against these threats, but also the folks that are developing these threats. And it's really scary what's out there and what's available to the average individual, whether it be just available for sale or what's on the dark web. And so we have to be able to modernize and keep in front of those threats. And so we are doing some things internally within our own cyber defense capabilities, specifically around malware triaging and detection. And that's something maybe I can save for a little bit later, but certainly we're leveraging the information that we have access to from a threat landscape perspective to inform how we can get in front of that threat to better protect and defend Canada at large. Because our remit now is not just the federal government, we also are protecting critical infrastructure, and of course we're very linked with the US in that space as well, and Canadians at large. We know that this is complex, and trying to help everybody understand and get the best possible information to protect themselves as quickly as possible.
I want to pluck on a thread of something you said a moment ago. You talked about tools that are available on the dark web, available to people who don't necessarily have a ton of technical skills. I think hackers and crackers who are really good at what they do call them script kiddies. But script kiddies can do a lot of damage, right? If their tools are good.
Absolutely.
So what kinds of things might be available now that they wouldn't have been able to get a couple of years ago, just off the shelf?
So I'm thinking without going to specifics, I think there's a lot of complexity there. And I think, again, the average, I think about, again, port scanning tools to just find out what ports are open to, you just need to find a weak link within that entire supply chain ecosystem, right? In order to actually get in to start to kind of mess around, figure out who's vulnerable, who is actually going to potentially be vulnerable to even clicking on a phishing link, right? And so back to Dr. Lashkari's comment, I think these tools are so sophisticated now, and in the wrong hands can really do a significant amount of damage. And of course, generative AI just amplifies that because it makes things faster and easier for folks. But there's also the securing of the data aspects behind those tools as well. And that's, again, something maybe for another focus, but securing that data and how the large language models are being trained is really, really important to set boundaries around that, such that we're not introducing further on vulnerabilities later on in the actual exploitation chain if the language models are incorrect, and all of a sudden there's configuration changes that are being suggested to users, but they're actually incorrect in introducing vulnerabilities later on, again, and somebody deploys this, particular configuration or system or piece of software in an operational environment, that could actually open the door for incidents, right, moving forward.
Somebody playing a long game, tainting training data, teaching people to misconfigure their security systems.
Exactly.
Okay. Penny Longman, you are in the trenches on this every single day. How much of this are you seeing practically?
I'm a who was it? I forget who said strong opinions loosely held. I'm honestly, of the things that keep me up at night, AI generated threats is not at the top of it. And if I think about some of my peers and what we're all facing, it's more about let's all just go get password managers and patch our stuff. Like that to me is that I come at it from a very tactical perspective, because honestly, for in many situations, if they're going to break into many of our systems, it's not going to be necessarily be with a particularly sophisticated threat, because especially in the healthcare field, there's a fair amount of technical debt, because we want to obviously spend money on things that save people's lives in the immediate sense, rather than that, obviously help support the things that save people's lives. I'm not aware of anything in our environment that is particularly attributable to AI. I share a lot of the concerns that the other panelists here have. I do know if you put a sophisticated model in the hands of a script kiddie who really still doesn't know how to do much in the way of programming, it's not necessarily going to suddenly elevate them here. It's going to make them better, but it's not necessarily suddenly going to make them a master programmer. I think there's areas where it could be very, very useful in helping to obfuscate the code to be able to reduce attribution. There's a whole lot of things like that. But I'm actually quite excited about the opportunities for AI from a blue team perspective. What are the ways that we can use it to improve our defenses? And I guess the one that really does bug me is just around the phishing emails, the way that they're using AI to generate better phishing emails. Although I have a very funny story about that. A friend of mine works at a large company, and they had an account takeover, like at a third-party supplier. And the reason that they caught it was because it was with a company in Korea, and they spoke with very sort of standard second language English. And the person who took it over actually had better, more colloquial sort of North American English. And that's how they kind of went, oh, wait a minute, this is actually, the language has got better instead, or more colloquial. And that's what sort of triggered them, that there was a problem. But the AI, the ability to craft, I actually got one the other day that was Penny and talked about, they must have got stuff off of LinkedIn, stuff that I've done recently. That's, if I have to be really scared of something, that's kind of where a lot of my fear comes in around AI. But I'm really excited about the possibilities from a defender point of view as well.
So the social engineering is the side of cyber attacks, or that's the really scary end of it for you.
It's, I guess for me, it's also somewhat scary. Maybe that's why I'm a bit of a skeptic, because I don't want to be that scared. But that's the one I think that if it's going to impact me and the citizens whose data I protect, that's where it's likely to come from. So,
Penny, tell us a little bit about the Fraser Health Authority's cyber defensive operations. You have all this precious data; it's very valuable. What kind of team do you have protecting it?
We have 100 people, and we're totally impenetrable. So don't even try.
I wouldn't say that out loud. That sounds like a dare.
No, oh, you're right. Actually, no. So, as a health authority, we have legacy systems, just like many other organizations. But as you said, that the core of the reason that our data is so precious is because it's health information, and it's infinitely more valuable. Not infinitely. It's exponentially more valuable on the dark web than even credit card information, because it can be used in many different ways. So when I started at Fraser 3 years ago, there was quite a small team, and there had recently been an audit done by the Officer of the Auditor General in BC, and looked at the way that the security was around our biomedical devices, and had pointed out some gaps in that. So our health authority and one of our sister health authorities, PHSA, Provincial Health Services Authority, which is a shared service who we outsource our SOC to, sat down and made some significant investments in improving the cybersecurity of our biomedical devices, but just of our environment as well. So, when I started 3 years ago, there were 3 people. Now we're up to a team of about 20. And we're just, attacking all of the columns in the NIST CSF to just kind of bring our cybersecurity up. So we had a lot outreach and security awareness and training. I do a monthly webinar a couple of times in the month to talk about passwords and application security and anything. And apparently I'm told I get way too excited about it. I'm like, I think you have to be passionate about cybersecurity to work in the cybersecurity field. But yeah, so huge investment at the moment in BC in general, and particularly in Fraser Health, because you can only live with that technical debt so long.
Arash, what opportunities, because we've begun talking about defenses, what opportunities do you see for generative AI in cyber defense for the good guys?
Okay. If you want to see from the other point of view, is not bad that I say, for example, as a founder of the BCCC, the Behavior-Centric Cybersecurity Center at York. So at first, we are trying to check this behavior. We want to figure out that how they are working. So one of the most common ways is the network traffic monitoring. By having these AI-based solutions, we are going to be able to have the live network traffic monitoring, and then trying to find any type of patterns to identify the anomalies here, which is going to help us, to find this type of the incidents and then go for the mitigation. If I go further to the other aspects that we can discuss, for example, on the critical systems we can discuss, such as energy, healthcare, transportation, and the others. Here, the AI is going to, again, play a crucial role for us based on the safeguarding control that we have. We can use AI for using this type of anomaly detection, monitoring, create the pattern as a ground truth, and then any type of deviation is going to help us to have a real-time, for example, detections. Or even if I go for one person, such as the personal data protection solutions, again, this type of, especially the machine learning algorithm, can help us to have the better user behavior profiling. And then definitely we can flag any type of suspicious activities based on these AI-based solutions that we have to help us to go and prevent the data breaches. So in somehow, as I mentioned, from one side, it's going to be a very good solution to improve the available codes, malicious code that the attackers have. But from the other side, for us also, is going to be a very good techniques that we can have it on top of the traditional solutions that we have to improve them for the faster detection, broad detection, or even more detail to have a better detection for the 0 days or unknown attack that is happening in the future.
I think that leads to a question from the audience that I want to get in, and I'm going to put it to you first, Melanie, and it has to do with the application of AI tools to open source intelligence, because it's your organization's job to suss out what the threats are. How is AI helpful in identifying some of the threats?
So thanks for the question. It's something that, again, when we talk about bolstering our cyber defenses and using AI for good, an example I wanted to share with you all is we have a malware triaging tool called Assembly Line. And so that basically is a tool that we've actually open sourced to anybody to use, any organization. It's free, it's on our website. And so internally, we also use that tool to triage basically the traffic that we're collecting to protect and defend against these cyber threats. And so one of the things we're doing is from an analytics standpoint, we are enabling some AI specific tools to be able to help some of the junior analysts and cyber defenders that we have in our organization to understand malicious code from any particular language. So whether it's JavaScript to Python to Java, whatever it is, in a way that can explain it at a high level exactly what that code is doing. Another example is there's actually an executive summary now that we're leveraging using AI tools to understand the output of the specific tool that we have, and what does that mean in terms of, if antivirus detected this particular binary that we're running through this assembly line tool, YARA rule matching and all of those sorts of things. So it's increasing the time for the analysts to really better understand the threats that we are seeing in real time. So it is something that we're working on internally, and we do intend to share that publicly again with the publicly available tool as we move forward. So that's just one example of how we're using our threat detection posture. And maybe one other example I'll share, and this is something that we do currently, is we actually issue pre-ransomware notifications to organizations. When we see threats coming in from a particular domain or IP, we strip any, obviously, private information from that, and we push it back out to our partners and our clients in this space to ensure that people know when we see a threat actor actually pre-positioning themselves on their infrastructure, we give them a warning. You need to go in and patch this specific vulnerability. This is what they're planning, right? And so that's another way that we use the threat intel for good to push it out to everybody that we can to protect ourselves from that. So it's an ever-evolving space.
Yeah. So not just generally batten the hatches, but batten that specific hatch,
right?
Because that's where bad people are on the other side of that hatch.
Exactly.
Thank you, Sammy Kogan, for that question. There's one I want to put to you, Penny, as well, from the audience, from a Mike Morris. I think it's right in your wheelhouse. And it's about governance of large information systems and information technology projects. What kinds of questions, if you are overseeing large IT projects in healthcare, what kinds of questions would you put from a cybersecurity perspective to the project teams? What do they need to keep in mind?
Well, first of all, we're always really happy when they invite us early on in the projects instead of just kind of bringing us in sort of near the end of it and say, hey, what did we do wrong that we should fix? So that's and it's happening more. It's happening more and more. A good place to start is to look at the vendor. We have dealt with some medical systems that we know are handling PHI, which if you're in BC, there's a separate regulatory environment than the rest of Canada.
PHI is private
health information, personal health information.
Yeah.
And we found some vendors who, because they might be using HIPAA, which is actually quite different. HIPAA talks about what the organizations that manage the data need to do, whereas our regulatory environment is that our patients own their own data, and we have to be protecting that sort of on their behalf. And we found quite a few vendors that just have quite a laissez-faire attitude towards security, with considering that they're using personal like health information. So that's a really good place to start first, is take a look at the vendor and figure out what kind of, just because they're they're using health information, their healthcare vendor, does not mean that they have appropriate safeguards around medical health information in Canada. And honestly, I would say that's one of the best places to start. And then the rest of it is to just start looking at, when you're still building the architecture around the solutions, to make sure that you're looking at things like encryption at rest. Encryption in transit. Again, a lot of legacy systems in the medical environment and others, encryption was never something that was considered, but there's almost always, there is a way that you can apply it, or you can apply it to part of it. So right at the very beginning, you're saying, okay, I'm connecting to a system that cannot encrypt data, but that doesn't give me a get out of jail free card to not encrypt it in transit to that system. So to me, those are two foundational elements around health information that would really, like, that would take off 80% in a lot of cases of the concerns that we as security professionals have when we're looking at architectures.
And actually, one more for you, Penny. This one from Sarah Kirk. And it's basic, but it's a good one. Why is health information so valuable to people who want to steal it? Just briefly.
So there's a couple of ways it can be used for extortion. A standard tabletop exercise is, oh, you got some celebrities information and it's been stolen, and we're going to release it unless you pay us. And even simpler, somebody running for school board. There's lots of times when it can be used from an extortion point of view, but the main value in the large volumes is it's information that can be in Canada. Health information is things that can be used for identity theft. In the US, it can be used again much more for identity theft. It can, if you're really getting I tend to always be thinking some sort of bigger pictures, but in the US, you're trying to get health coverage, you have to supply your health records, and if you've modified an MRI image to not show some congenital deformation, then that's a very lucrative use case for people to be able to get into that or replace this image with a different image. So it's just got to do with the highly personal nature of it, and the ability for fraud.
I have a neighbor down the street who is in charge of IT for a community health clinic, family medicine, healthy baby stuff. But they also do drug treatment programs. They have a supervised injection site, various things like that. He was saying to me that they're fighting off like sort of low level but constant attacks from foreign state actors. I live in Ottawa. You never know whose kid is going to be treated for an addiction and what might that information might be useful for, I guess. And he says that that Iran is trying to break into his computers was surprising at first, but when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Arash, speaking of foreign state actors, here's another question from the audience. This one from Branka Marianne. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. What kind of international cooperation could be helpful in either regulating the use of artificial intelligence to make it less of a cybersecurity threat, or cooperating to improve cyber defenses on the positive side?
Okay, perfect. It's not bad if I say that what is the current infrastructure that we have. So internationally, we have several infrastructures that they are looking to find the vulnerabilities and weaknesses and try to standardize them. So we have this team I can say more than 20,000, actually specialists, professionals in the different fields try to actually report all these new vulnerabilities, the attack patterns and others to be standardized. But on top of this one, always we have the issue of the regulations, the laws. So you can see my first book in 2020, I tried to analyze what do we have internationally to communicate and share the information based on all the issues or problems that we are facing in different countries. For example, I can say that country X has an infrastructure and they actually have some experience in this one. So we need to share all these experiences in a high level with the other countries. And then we need to have an international community to gather all of them and help to have the best legislation and regulars for different countries. So each country has a specific one, but I do believe sharing the information, especially the reports that is happening for them. I don't know, we have quarter reports, annual reports, okay, and anything that they faced in a summary to be shared with the other countries is going to be one of the key points that now we are facing this one as a big lag, and countries are trying to keep that one for themselves, sometimes for the security purposes. But still, I think that if we forget this security part, there are some common perspectives or point of views that we can share with each others to create a bigger atmosphere that each countries can use these type of, such as standards, regulations, laws or any actually other things that they need to apply in their solution when they want to design. So, for example, in Canada, if I have a bunch of the solutions that we have, definitely the experience from the other countries is going to be helpful here, because we are not going to face always the national level actually attacks. Most of them are coming from the other countries and international. So having their actually understanding and summary is going to give us the clue to be more prepared for the future attacks, which actually we don't have this one. So we have a good team to create these standards for the vulnerabilities, for the weaknesses, for the attack patterns. We have a big database for this one. But when we are coming to the regulation parts and understanding in the law and others, actually we are facing this big lack and issue.
Melanie, you want to add to that?
May I jump in? Absolutely. Yeah. So I think there, from an incident response perspective, there is a large amount of international collaboration that happens already. So the national CSIRT, so the cybersecurity incident response teams of each nation. And so I will say, from our perspective in the government, that is something that we work in every day. So we often get alerts from various countries saying, we're noticing this, have you seen this? We're looking at common patterns of behavior and activity, sometimes from those nation state actors as well, to again be able to better prepare, defend, and protect against some of those threat actors. So that's kind of at the basic level. I'll say that's happening all the time right now, and definitely that information helps to inform a lot of the discussions that are happening international at the policy level. Certainly, we work with our allies in this space. Specifically, I'll call it the Five Eyes allies, and we're actually co-branding a number of advisories as we see things. We're basically getting that information out as quickly as possible, and again, co-branding it depending on which nations have been involved in observing that activity and the mitigation measures to protect against that. There's another layer in terms of the AI cooperation that's happening as well, and there again noting there are some bills going through Parliament in that space as well on the AI front within Canada. But again, noting what the other nations are doing in this space to inform policy, to look at the regulations. And I agree the regulations challenge is a big one. It's certainly depending on the country that you're in and the actual way that the I guess the democracy is structured and the ability to move quickly in some of these spaces. And some countries are more forward leaning in the tech space than others. It can take a lot of time to actually build those laws and those regulations around the proper and safe use of AI tools specifically, and the boundaries in which basically they're to be used within the country. And then on top of that, again, strategically, there is, again, those regulations and understanding what each country is doing. And so it's a very complex and dynamic space, especially with AI and generative AI and all of the things that are happening internationally. But I just wanted to reiterate purely from a protection standpoint, right now, there is a ton of collaboration that happens. And in the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, we are kind of at the heart of that. So anytime we're working with our national CSIRT partners, we're getting that information out as quickly as possible, and also augmenting our own advice and guidance with anything new that we're learning.
Actually, something I'll throw in so you don't have to. There's a report that I'm sure you're aware of, Melanie, from out of the British Parliament a couple months ago now, I guess, sort of assessing the various intelligence and defense cooperation stuff that the UK does with the other Five Eyes partners, and a lot of it's redacted. But one thing that's not is the Brits think that Canadians are fantastic at cybersecurity, ahead of them on a bunch of stuff. And, yeah,
we're doing a lot of great things. It's not always public, but we are doing a lot of really important work and sharing again as much as we can to help other organizations within Canada, but also our international partners where we can.
I wanted, sticking with you, Melanie, for a sec, to get you to take up something that Penny raised a few minutes ago, talking about tech debt, and all the organizations, we've all worked in them, some work in them now, that there's always something more immediately valuable to spend money on rather than buying new computers, upgrading software, sticking with I worked in newspapers for a long time, and there was not a lot of money around, and the computers were ancient. What kinds of, and so I'm going to make this question, try to focus it tightly. What kinds of technical threats are you open to if your technology is old?
To summarize, a whole lot. As Penny mentioned, a lot of the vulnerabilities that we see, cyber criminals, state actors take advantage of are things that already exist with patches and mitigation measures in place. And so that regular, even I think from a personal standpoint, the human behavior, like, I gotta go ahead and update all my apps and I gotta change my passwords and doing all those things. We don't necessarily want to spend the time, but spending that time and having a regular, cyber hygiene routine for organizations and individuals is really, really important, because again, the large majority of the vulnerabilities that we are seeing that are exploited are things that are widely known. It's not necessarily the 0 days. Yes, those things definitely come into play, but it's definitely not as often. And so multi-factor authentication, basic updating of software, transitioning out and having that life cycle management, I think for both software and hardware is really, really important. And then balancing that with, it's hard, right? There's only so much money. And so investing in the modernization activities while also keeping some of those legacy things running is a hard balance to strike. But education and really implementing those basic cybersecurity hygiene controls is very, very important from a threat perspective.
In a large organization, that can be especially challenging. I think I was reading some document I got via ATIP from Shared Services Canada talking about its obligation to maintain obsolete systems, because there are still obsolete systems in government, and try to get organizations to use shared services, more modern stuff, and kind of complaining about these diametrically opposed instructions. So even within the government of Canada, which has
Absolutely
extensive resources.
I've spent a large majority of my career working in project management and moving tech from modern, like legacy systems into modern systems, and it's hard. You have to have all of the right balances, and it's a cultural shift for a lot of people as well. So it goes into the human aspects of transformation and change management.
Penny, Melanie got into some of the practical stuff, and I want to get each of you to address this as we sort of near the end here. If you were, and you were previously, if you were in a small organization, what would be your top priorities? What practical things can people do to protect themselves better from cyber attacks?
Well, I think in general, it doesn't really matter, just to follow on a bit from what Melanie said, it doesn't matter the size of your organization. It's one of the critical things in cybersecurity is to understand what your risks are. Where are your vulnerabilities, right? In other industries, maybe if you didn't know, then they give you a buy. But in cybersecurity, if you didn't know, that's a bigger black mark than, or negative than if you knew and had at least sort of had a plan. But what identifying all of your risks gives you the opportunity to prioritize. And I do see that that's an area that, again, just to sort of tie it back in, where AI can potentially help us, because AI can look at our environment, and there's a fair amount of that's just machine learning, not necessarily full-blown AI, but here's our environment, here's the vulnerabilities we've got, here's the kind of work that we do, what are the places that we are most likely to be vulnerabilities attacked through, and then let's address them first. So to me, it is important to understand what your risks are, and then look at prioritizing them. And because you don't have to fix every single 0 day, right? You just have to fix the ones that are A, being actively exploited, and B, being actively exploited in environments like yours, going after the kind of data that you have. Then you're going to be streets ahead from if you don't know. So to me, that's a really, really big one. And if I can answer one of the audience questions about a password manager, any password manager is the best password manager, except ones in your browser. One of the recent, I won't go into detail, but one of the recent large-scale attacks happened because a sysadmin, like a person with elevated privileges, had saved a password in their personal Gmail password manager in their browser. And because that ends up being synced over various places, they were able to access that password through the shared browser password managers. So those are not necessarily recommended, but any password manager, if you go look it up, pick the third one down, because they're probably not paying for it. And for the listing, if you use Google, and just use anything is better.
So 1Password, LastPass. How do we feel about LastPass these days? They've had a bit of a rough time, right?
They had a rough time and didn't necessarily deal with it in a good way. So I actually moved off of LastPass. But again, that's just personal.
Now, what do you use? Let me ask you that.
I use 1Password because it's Canadian, and I tend to recommend that. Yeah. So yeah. So
all right.
Do I get a kickback
That's
for
what
that?
we use. Arash, practically speaking, I'm an IT guy in a small organization. What advice do you have for me to protect the people I'm responsible for?
Let's think about this one. I can say we can think about two different stages. At first, how you can gather all these type of common attacks that you will face. For example, if you are in the healthcare or if you are in the energy sector or others. So we have different devices. It is not just computer that we are using or laptop. So there are so many smart devices that are coming. So here, having a system that can actually give this opportunity to the attackers to attack to that one and gather your information and everything is going to be really important. That we normally doing that one for the big companies, but maybe for small companies are difficult, but they can read from the other reports, such as the HoneyNet or different type of the honeypots that they are using to capture all these abnormal activities that will happen. And then on top of this one, or in the other actually sides, you need to understand that which type of machines you are using at first, okay, as a IT guys, and then check the vulnerabilities that you actually reported, and then different type of the patches that you have, the updated version and everything. So instead of thinking about what will happen to me tomorrow, I can recommend you that, okay, be sure that you have all your operating system updated, and then try to understand that if there is any patches, anything related to some vulnerabilities to the operating system or specific machines that you are using, please apply all of them. And then having the, I should say, cybersecurity awareness, such a boot camps every month, every weeks, to give some hints or some actually small lessons to the colleagues that use it. Because whenever you do your best, who is going to be the targeted? The normal users, not you as an IT admin. Nobody is attacking you. So they are coming to the actually common users. So here the main issue is how much you helped that your actually end users be familiar with this type of cybersecurities. So, for example, we are talking about phishing attacks, but is there any ways that you are talking to your actually end users about how they can improve their knowledge for this, for example, topic, phishing attacks? We are talking about, for example, secure links. So anybody, when they're facing a link, they are going to click it in their email. So did you give them any solution? For example, did you introduce them a website that before they click on that one, they can check the link, and then after that, they can click on that one? So for me, I'm trying to have the balance between the solutions that I have, even the small and common solutions such as updating, running the patches and others, instead of thinking about the future attacks or some the most expensive actually solutions. The second one is the training one that normally we are totally forget that one, and we have the most secure solutions, but then you can see that the password is actually in the stickers in the monitor, or they never use the actually password managers. So making balance in these two is going to be my common solution.
So, Melanie, what advice do you have for a small organization? Doesn't have a lot of resources, but wants to protect themselves from the biggest threats?
Absolutely. So I think there are a ton of free resources out there that don't cost money. And I'm going to plug a couple. So the Get Cyber Safe program that the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity runs has practical, tangible advice for anyone. This is not for folks with, advanced computer science degrees or anything. It is literally, how do I secure my home router? It teaches you the fundamentals and the basics of cybersecurity so that you can take that as individuals into your organizations. So that would be one, is leverage those free resources that exist. I'll say also on our Cyber Center website, we have an entire section dedicated to individuals and business organizations and specifically small and medium businesses. So definitely check out the resources, cyber.gc.ca. There is a ton of information out there, and we're, as I said before, we're doing our best to get this information out there that's relevant, easy to follow, timely, in a way that is going to be useful and impactful for organizations. So just to reiterate, from my perspective, education is one of the biggest challenges in this space, because we have folks that grew up with tech, and then we have folks that have never maybe used tech at all. We have the entire spectrum there. And so I think again, the educating folks wherever they're at to help raise the bar in terms of the resilience, and also say to increase the skepticism in terms of what we're seeing online with AI, with deepfakes, and all of those things that exist today. You have to be critical in terms of what you're seeing. If it feels weird or wrong, it likely is. There's a campaign that we've been running around raising the eyebrow and being skeptical about the information that you're seeing, and that's really important, because if you're not, you can be susceptible to phishing attacks. You may look at something and go, wow, that looks really legit. If you're not sure, check it. Talk with a friend, get a cybersecurity buddy who's really advanced in these things and can give you those practical tips. But again, I think there's a lot of free resources that exist, and I encourage everyone to leverage those, because they're constantly being updated with all of the latest and greatest threat information and advice and guidance based on what we're seeing in Canada.
So, I mean, it sounded like the theme from all three of you was fairly similar, that there are new threats and new defensive techniques that people who are pros in the field need to be aware of and do engage with every day. But for the average person who's just trying to live a life and not get ripped off, the advice is basically the same. Update your apps, patch your stuff, don't click on suspicious links, think hard about what you're seeing before you go down some potentially dangerous road online. And if something looks too good to be true or looks strange, don't go there. And if you are in charge of a small group and trying to up your cybersecurity, train your users, but also give them alternatives. Tell them what to do. Don't just say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Is that yeah, Melanie?
Yeah, and if I can add one thing, report it.
Report
it. There are ways to basically report, smishing texts that come in. There are ways to report cyber incidents. The reason I say that is because every time that's reported, at least from a cyber center perspective, we're able to leverage that information to have a clearer picture of the threat landscape and to basically educate and issue mitigation advice to Canada at large. So the reporting aspect is also really, really important.
More data points to feed the AI with to recognize these threats. We are just about out of time. I am so grateful to all of you for your time and your insight and your generosity. This has been a great conversation. So Melanie Anderson, Director General of Secure Solutions and Services at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, Penny Longman, the Director of Information Security at the Fraser Health Authority in BC, and Professor Arash Habibi Lashkari, Canada Research Chair in Cybersecurity at York University. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As I close out, I want to thank our sponsor, Farhaz Thobani by name, Kyndryl Canada, of which he is president, for making this possible and letting us open it up to subscribers and non-subscribers. Thank you, the audience, for joining us today. You're why we all do what we do. Particularly thank our subscribers who make it all possible. Subscriber support means everything to The Logic. It allows us to do our journalism. It allows us to have these panels. It allows us to ask questions of the powerful and try to hold people accountable and to try to do our little bit to make Canada better on your behalf. So if you're not already a subscriber, now is the time. You can find a link to subscribe in the chat or at thelogic.co. I want to thank the business team that put together this event. John Packman behind the scenes running the technical direction, Kim, Anna, Ariel, Jenna, all the people who support the journalism that gets done at The Logic. We have some events upcoming. We have an exciting schedule actually that's coming together for the rest of the year. But the next thing that is coming up is on February the 27th. It's going to be a deep dive into the current state of the Canadian venture capital ecosystem. Watch your inbox if you're a subscriber for the invite to that. And also for all other future event invites. You get plenty of warning. And I would be remiss if I did not plug The Logic's new book, of which I have a copy. It is called Superintelligence, and it combines all the reporting in a great big series that we did on artificial intelligence in Canada late last year. I was at a panel discussion a little while ago, and somebody talked about artificial intelligence as Canada's gift to the world because of all the foundational work that was done here. As we've heard today, and gifts can have complicated legacies and complicated ramifications, but I think the idea is, in general, it's going to be a huge benefit to us. Thank you again for joining us. I'm David Reevely, an Ottawa reporter for The Logic. stay tuned for our next event. Thanks.